In 2011, I got a position, a fellowship to work on Dead Sea Scrolls fragments in a private collection in Norway. These manuscripts belonged to a excuse me, a collector by the name of Martin Skoyen, who collected all sorts of things. Like he collected artifacts from ancient Babylon. He has a fine collection of Buddhist manuscripts. He's got folios that he bought that, come out of the Vatican. He's even got some modern stuff. Like he had an early draft copy of The Philosopher's Stone by J.K. Rowling. Like he is a consummate collector. He collects everything. One of the things that he collects are these Dead Sea Scrolls fragments. He has over 30 of them. I was hired to help with the publication of his small collection of fragments. In the time that I was working there, I and other members of my team started seeing suspicious things on these small fragments themselves that looked quite different from what we know of the actual authentic collection of Dead Sea Scrolls manuscripts. So in the course of a couple of years, we developed a system of criteria for testing whether manuscripts on a cursory examination were likely authentic or forged. Some of the things that I think are fairly easy to spot. If you can imagine, a small fragment of material, it comes from a larger manuscript, and the idea is that it's broken away and the rest of it's worn off. It's got lines of text on it. On some of the fragments, you would notice that the lines would follow the edges of the fragment and not just go straight across, which is weird. A lot of the letters looked misshapen, as if, they were the fragment was already damaged at the time that it was being written. And it's
could you carbon date them to see what
they're too small, because you require quite a bit of material. Especially with private collectors who have these tiny little things, convincing them to carbon date some of their already tiny little fragments, because it requires a certain amount of material to destroy, right? You have to destroy the material to carbon date it. So, they're extremely reluctant to do that. Most of the dating actually occurs through something called paleography, where we look at handwriting styles. Before typeset printing, everything was written by hand, and handwriting styles developed and evolved over time. So it, in particular, in these earlier periods when everything was handwritten, writing itself was a much more controlled discipline in terms of learning it. There were very specific ways you learned to write. So it becomes more, I guess, consistent, especially when working on formal manuscripts, as opposed to like little documents or letters that you're just writing to your friends. So we date most of this stuff through handwriting styles. It's called paleography.
Interesting.
It's accurate to within about 50 to 100 years, depending on who you're talking to. Some have said that we can paleographically date stuff to within 20 years. I'm skeptical about that. And a number of the manuscripts from the Dead Sea Scrolls have been carbon dated.
How many would you say?
The Dead Sea Scrolls have actually been carbon dated 3 times.
How many of them?
In fact, at this point now, over 100.
Over 100.
Yes. So, and what the carbon dating has done for us is it's actually helped to show that the paleography, the paleographic systems that scholars are using to date the texts are actually pretty good. So, you know, when your paleographical dates match the carbon dates, it shows that you're doing something right. So the scrolls were they were first carbon dated back in the late 1940s, early 1950s. Excuse me, I think it was 8 or 10 of these. Interestingly, the Dead Sea Scrolls were some of the first items ever to have been carbon dated. So it was a new science.
Yeah, back in the 40s?
In the 40s. So it was a big deal when you could finally, you know, use this new science. And some of the scrolls were a guinea pig. Many of them were recarbon dated in the 1980s. And now there's another project. Sorry, I got a cough here.
No, you're good. It's okay. We just went through a Category 4 Hurricane Helena.
Yeah,
so
right.
You got an excuse.
So there's a new project that's been underway for the last 5 or 6 years where they've been recarbon dating. I believe it's up to 100 manuscripts. So, and we're still waiting for some of the results of that. But yeah. So when it came to the material that this private collector had, he didn't want to let it go to be carbon dated. Like I said, you have to destroy things in order to date.
But
them
he did let you guys analyze the writing style.
So,
and what percentage of them were fake?
So of the 9 that were tested, we had a high confidence that all of them were.
All of them were fake.
All of them were. And some of the features of them that tipped us off on this, I'll give you some examples. This was a major one. So most of them are animal skin, which is vellum. It's like a really, really thin, finely prepared leather.
Cow hide? Is it cow skin? Or?
The Dead Sea Scrolls are cow and goat hide.
Okay.
There's a handful that are actually papyrus, which is papyrus is made from drying and sticking together like these special papyrus leaves, and they'll put them together, you know, one on top of the other, and use a special resin to keep them stuck together. Over time, these materials start to delaminate, so the top layers start to peel away a little bit.
It's papyrus.
Yes.
Okay.
Also on vellum.
Oh, okay.
You will get places where the top layers of the vellum will peel away or flake off.
Vellum is the animal hide?
That's the animal skin, yes. I actually think vellum is technically deer, but I don't know.
Okay.
I call it vellum. It's
tomato
leather.
tomato.
That's right. So one of the things that we did notice that we had confirmed by the physicist was that on some of Scoian's fragments where there's writing, the writing would slip into places where the top layer has already flaked away. Right? So
it was that meaning
already
it was written
damaged.
on old shit.
Yeah.
Written on damaged material.
By the time that the writing is added to it. So, you know, but it did, like, we're looking at photographs and then we're looking under a microscope. But it's still, you know, it's still not perfectly clear. So the physicist that we worked with had this incredibly high-powered special microscope that basically makes like a 3D topography of the fragment and you're able to see then all the layers, and you can see very clearly, there's ink that literally falls off this layer and drops into this giant valley here, right? So that's one of the things that we were able to see. But maybe one of the craziest clues about the forgeries was on this one manuscript. There were salt particles.
What kind of particles?
Salt.
So,
and I think, you know, which wouldn't be unusual because the Dead Sea Scrolls come from the Dead Sea region, which has, you know, lots of them will have, you know, salt deposits on them.
The Dead Sea is like a super salty sea.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a very salty region.
Yeah.
So, on the fragments that I've looked at that are authentic, where you can see some of these salt crystals, they look different, right? Like they have sort of a it's not a uniform composition to them. They look kind of like these weird crystals, right, under the microscope. The salt granules that were on this particular fragment were cubical, like little salt crystals. And in the testing, it was discovered that these were actually table salt. Table salt wasn't invented until the I think the 15th or 16th century. So
That's
I'm
amazing
not sure,
that they can discern the. I mean, I guess it's not amazing. Just to like a layman like me, the fact that they can figure out the difference between table salt and sea salt.
I know, right?
Natural sea salt.
You do, yeah. You do. It's table salt has it's got a particular chemical composition. 'Cause it's processed, right? So you know the things that go into processing table salt, and that's one of the ways in which you can identify it and distinguish it from like a natural salt. And I don't know whether, I mean, it's still a mystery. It looks like somebody literally took a salt shaker and just sprinkled salt on it. Was that an attempt to try and convince someone that, oh, look, there's salt on it, it came from the Dead Sea? Or was it just an accident even? Somebody was having lunch and